take it from here, Miranda, Marcus said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone that he wielded like a finely tuned instrument. He gently pushed my portfolio, the one containing 3 months of my soul, across the polished mahogany table as if it were a misplaced coaster. The client wants to see senior partners for the final pitch. It's about projecting gravitas. He gave me that smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes, a perfectly crafted mask of paternalistic reassurance. It was a smile I had come to loathe more than any overt criticism. It was the smile of dismissal. My throat tightened, a familiar, acrid knot of frustration and silent fury. Months of 18-hour days, models built until my fingers were raw from craft knives, thousands of lines of code for the environmental simulations, my vision, my concept, my breakthrough. And just like that, I was being erased. I nodded mutely, watching as Marcus Thorne and Isabella Rossi, the 2 senior partners of Crestwood Architects, gathered my work. My blueprints, my 3D rendered fly-throughs, my meticulously detailed sustainability reports, they held it all under their arms as if they'd conceived every line themselves. They hadn't even bothered to remove the tiny, almost invisible watermark of my initials, MV, from the corner of the architectural renderings. I am Miranda Vance, 28 years old. And until that moment, I thought my talent would be enough to overcome the politics of design. Before I tell you the rest of this story, a story that still makes a tremor run through my hands, let me set the stage. If you've ever poured your heart into a project only to have someone else sign their name to it, then you know the unique, cold brand of violation I'm talking about. And you will want to see how this particular game of chess concluded. I joined Crestwood Architects a year ago, fresh out of my master's program where I'd graduated top of my class, my thesis on sustainable, biomimetic architecture, winning the prestigious Pritzker Student Medallion. I wasn't some starry-eyed intern. I came with a portfolio that had already garnered low-level industry buzz. My specialty is what the industry is now desperate for: generative design integrated with net-zero energy systems. It's the art of creating buildings that don't just sit on the land, but breathe with it. It's technically dense, artistically demanding work. It's the future. At least, that's what I believed. What they don't teach you in architecture school is that the blueprint for a career isn't drawn with skill and innovation alone. It's drafted in the old boys' network, in hushed conversations at charity galas, and on the lush greens of exclusive country clubs. I was not in Marcus Thorne's circle. Marcus, with his silvering temples, custom-tailored Italian suits, and a laugh that could charm a city council into approving the most outrageous zoning variants, was the firm's rainmaker. He sat on the board of the Modern Art Museum and was on a first-name basis with every real estate mogul in the city. What Marcus did not possess was a single original design idea in the last decade. He was a master curator of other people's genius, and my genius was his latest acquisition. The Helios Tower project wasn't just another high-rise. It was the white whale of urban development. Kalen Sterling, a reclusive tech billionaire and a vocal environmental philanthropist, wanted to build a legacy. He'd announced a global competition to design a 90-story mixed-use skyscraper in the city center that would not only be a landmark, but would be the world's first positive energy skyscraper, generating more power than it consumed. It was an $850 million commission that would instantly catapult the winning firm into the stratosphere of architectural legends. We had chased this project for 6 months, submitting preliminary concepts that went nowhere. They were generic, safe, Crestwood-branded glass boxes. Then I found the key. Late one night, buried in meteorological data and urban heat island studies, I saw the flaw in every other proposal. They were all fighting the environment. I proposed a design that collaborated with it. This is revolutionary, Miranda. Truly, Isabella Rossi had told me 3 months ago, her eyes, the eyes of a once brilliant designer who had herself been a Pritzker winner 20 years ago, gleaming with genuine excitement. Flesh this out. Keep it quiet. Let's develop this before we show it to Marcus. I trusted Isabella. She was the only other female partner, the one who'd championed hiring me. I thought she was my mentor, my advocate. She knew what it was like to be the only woman at the drafting table. For 3 months, the Helios Tower became my entire existence. I canceled a trip home for my mother's 60th birthday. I worked through a bout of pneumonia, fueled by coffee and antibiotics, with a roll of trace paper as my pillow. I developed the entire concept, a tower designed with biomimetic principles, its form inspired by the structure of a termite mound for natural ventilation. I engineered a double-skin facade with integrated algae tubes to generate biofuel. I created a central atrium that acted as the building's lung, and most critically, I designed a unique kinetic shading system that responded dynamically to the sun's position. It was my symphony, every note, every crescendo, written by me. Last week we got the call. Kaylin Sterling's team was floored. They wanted a final, in-person presentation. Mr. Sterling himself, notoriously private and technically savvy, would be attending. The office buzzed with electric energy. "This is it, team. We're in the finals," Marcus announced in a firm-wide meeting, beaming as if he'd just summited Everest. "Isabella and I will be leading the presentation. We need to be flawless." He glanced around the room, his eyes skipping right over me. I waited for him to mention my name, to outline my role in presenting the complex environmental systems. The questions would be incredibly technical. They would need the architect, not the salesman. But the meeting ended. My name was never spoken. That afternoon, Isabella stopped by my desk, her expensive Italian shoes making no sound on the polished concrete floor. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Marcus feels it's better for the partners to handle the room," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's about projecting a united front of leadership. You understand." "But it's my design," I managed to say, my own voice alarmingly thin. "What happens when Sterling asks about the actuator mechanics for the kinetic facade, or the airflow calculus for the atrium?" "I'll handle the technical questions," she said, avoiding my gaze. "You've walked me through the core concepts. I have your notes. Marcus is insistent, Miranda." "And you, what do you feel?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she placed a cool hand on my shoulder. "Your time will come. This is how you learn to play the game." The game, the goddamned game. The morning of the presentation, I came in at dawn. Isabella had asked me to be on standby, a pathetic token gesture we both knew was meaningless. I sat at my desk, a ghost in my own victory, and watched as Kaylin Sterling and his team arrived. They were a world apart, dressed in understated, impeccable clothing that screamed wealth more loudly than any logo. They radiated an aura of quiet, absolute authority. Marcus greeted them with his practiced, easy charm, while Isabella stood beside him, a portrait of professional poise. They vanished into the main conference room, the one we called the glass box. Its floor-to-ceiling glass walls designed for transparency, though today it felt more like a stage for a play I was not allowed to be in. The presentation began. Through the glass, I could see them pointing to my slides, my work, elegantly printed and bound in leather portfolios bearing the Crestwood logo. My name was nowhere. 10 minutes in, Marcus was gesticulating with theatrical enthusiasm, explaining my vision for the tower's iconic silhouette. 20 minutes in, Isabella was pointing to my complex environmental diagrams. 30 minutes in, I saw him, Kaylin Sterling. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 40s, with intense, analytical eyes. He leaned forward, his focus absolute. And in that moment, watching them perform my passion, it wasn't anger that filled me. It was something colder, sharper. It was clarity. They were showing him my art, but they didn't understand how the paint was made. I had made a decision 2 days ago, a quiet act of rebellion after Isabella had delivered her verdict. I had subtly altered the technical schematics. The core innovation of the entire project, the linchpin of its positive energy claim, was the kinetic facade. It was made of thousands of hexagonal panels that opened and closed to regulate heat and sunlight. The mechanism that controlled them, a proprietary microactuator system I had designed based on the principles of floral phototropism, was a work of genius. And the detailed schematics for that actuator, along with the control algorithm, were now missing from the presentation documents. They existed in only one place on Earth, my personal, encrypted hard drive, and in the intricate architecture of my own mind. I'd told myself it was an issue of intellectual property protection. But sitting there, watching them steal my glory, I knew the truth. It was my insurance policy. My checkmate move in a game I had never wanted to play. 45 minutes into the meeting, I saw it happen. Kaylin Sterling was asking a question. I could see the shape of the words from his mouth. "How does it work?" His brow was furrowed in confusion. Marcus's confident posture faltered. He gestured to Isabella. She began flipping through the portfolio, a hint of panic in her precise movements. Her face grew pale, then, as if on cue, every single head in that glass box turned, their gazes sweeping across the open-plan office and landing squarely on me. My phone buzzed on my desk, a text from Isabella, "Conference room, now." My heart became a wild drum against my ribs. My colleagues, feigning work, watched me with naked curiosity as I stood. I smoothed down my simple black dress, took a breath that did nothing to calm the storm inside me, and walked the 100 feet that felt like a mile. I pushed open the heavy glass door. "Ah, there she is," Marcus said, his smile now a grotesque, strained thing. "Everyone, this is Miranda Vance, one of our brilliant junior architects who was instrumental in compiling the research for the project." Compiling the research, not designing the tower, not inventing the solution, compiling. Kalen Sterling didn't even look at Marcus. His sharp, intelligent eyes were locked on me. I saw his name placard on the table. Kalen Sterling, Chairman, Sterling Dynamics. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice calm and direct, a stark contrast to Marcus's hollow showmanship. "Your partners have presented a fascinating concept. They claim this kinetic facade can reduce the building's energy consumption by 60%. The concept is poetic." He tapped my rendering of the shimmering, moving building skin. "But the mechanism is magic. They are unable to explain the precise engineering of the actuators that would prevent cascading failure in high winds or how the control algorithm compensates for seasonal solar declination. Without that, this isn't a design. It's a very expensive fantasy." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus's face was a blotchy, furious red. Isabella looked at me with a desperate, pleading expression that asked me to save her, to save them, to save the lie. This was the moment, the fulcrum on which my entire future would pivot. I could play the game, smooth it over, and let them keep the credit, or I could burn the whole board down. I didn't answer immediately. I walked past the chairs arranged along the wall for junior staff and pulled up an empty one at the main table, directly opposite Kalen Sterling. Marcus had to physically shift his own chair to make room for me. I placed my hands on the table. I belonged here. "The detailed actuator schematics are not in the portfolio," I said, my voice steady and clear, resonating in the charged silence. "I judge them too technically dense for a strategic overview. They rely on a system I developed that uses decentralized, piezoelectric microactuators instead of a centralized hydraulic system." Sterling's eyebrows shot up. A flicker of genuine interest lit his eyes. "You developed?" "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze without blinking. "I developed the kinetic facade, the algae bioreactor, the geothermal exchange, and the overall biomimetic form you've been reviewing for the past hour. The entire architectural and environmental solution is mine." "You could have cut the tension with a T-square." Marcus sputtered, opening his mouth to spew some damage control, but Sterling held up a hand, silencing him without a glance. He was focused solely on me. "Then perhaps," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips, "you should be the one to walk us through it, Ms. Vance." For the next half hour, I was no longer Miranda Vance, the junior architect. I was the creator. I took a marker and walked to the whiteboard. I drew the hexagonal panel array. I sketched the microactuator, explaining how its layered crystalline structure contracted and expanded with minimal electrical input, a principle I'd adapted from synthetic muscle fiber research. I detailed the fail-safes, the feedback loops, the way the building-wide AI would learn and predict weather patterns to pre-position the facade for maximum efficiency. I was in my element, the language of design and engineering flowing from me effortlessly. I answered increasingly detailed questions from Sterling and his two lead engineers. With every correct answer, with every intricate explanation, I saw the looks on their faces shift from skepticism to curiosity, and finally, to respect. They had found the architect. They were finally speaking to the mind behind the machine. Marcus and Isabella were statues of silent, impotent rage. They were completely and utterly excluded from the conversation, unable to contribute, unable even to follow the technical nuance of the discussion. They had been exposed not by my accusations, but by the glaring, undeniable depth of their own ignorance. When I finally capped the marker and turned back to the table, Sterling was leaning back in his chair, looking at me with an expression of profound satisfaction. "Well," he said, letting the word hang in the air, "that certainly clarifies things." He then turned to Marcus, his voice turning to ice. "Mr. Thorne, I have to ask, why was the actual architect of this project relegated to standby WH? You presented her work." Marcus's face contorted. "We believe in a team approach at Crestwood. We mentor our junior talent by allowing them to support senior leadership in high stakes. My experience," Sterling cut him off smoothly, "is that the most valuable presentations are given by the people who actually did the work, the ones who can answer the damned questions." He turned back to me. "Ms. Vance, should we move forward with Crestwood, will you be the lead architect overseeing every phase of construction?" Before Marcus could dare to answer for me, I spoke. "That would be the non-negotiable condition of my involvement." I could practically feel Marcus's teeth grinding into dust. Sterling nodded. "Excellent. I'm not in the business of funding figureheads. I work with the creators." The meeting concluded soon after. As Sterling's team filed out, he paused and handed me his card. Not a generic company card, but his private one. "Not Marcus, not Isabella. You," he said pointedly. "Call me directly if you have any further thoughts. I appreciate a mind that builds its own locks and holds its own keys." The glass door clicked shut, leaving the three of us in the sudden, deafening silence. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Marcus Thorne, with his impeccable suit now looking like a costume, was a statue of fury. A vein pulsed violently in his temple. Isabella just stared at the glossy surface of the table, her reflection a fractured image of her former confidence. "What in the hell was that?" Marcus finally hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You deliberately, maliciously, withheld crucial design information from the client pitch materials." I met his incandescent gaze without flinching. My own composure was a thin sheet of ice over a raging sea, but I would not let it crack. I prioritized the information. I presented the vision in the portfolio and retained the core technical specifications for a direct, expert explanation. It was a judgment call. "A judgment call?" His voice escalated, and he shot a nervous glance towards the glass walls, as if remembering they were on display. "You stood there and made me look like a fool. You made us look like fools." "I did my job," I replied, my voice as cold and hard as stone. "I designed a building that solved Kaylin Sterling's impossible challenge. I saved a pitch that you were seconds away from losing. Isn't that what Crestwood pays me for?" Isabella finally looked up, her face a mask of betrayal, aimed, impossibly, at me. "Miranda, you should have told us about the actuator specifics. We could have been prepared." The hypocrisy of it, the sheer audacity of her blaming me for a predicament of her own making, caused something to snap. The ice broke. "Prepared?" I asked, my voice dripping with a scorn I no longer tried to conceal. "How, Isabella? By having me write you a script to memorize? By me dumbing it down so Marcus could perform it like a stage play? Or would you have only allowed me in this room if you'd known beforehand that you couldn't possibly fake your way through it without me?" Neither of them answered. The truth was a harsh, unflattering light in the room, and they couldn't bear to look at it. We all knew the answer. I gathered my portfolio, and turned to leave. Marcus moved to block my path. "This isn't over, Miranda, not by a long shot." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're right, Marcus, it's not." Walking back to my desk felt like floating. The office was a sea of curious, upturned faces. The whispers started before I even sat down. They didn't know the details, but they knew the world had shifted on its axis. Power has an almost physical presence, and its new epicenter was my humble drafting station. It didn't take long. My computer pinged. A calendar invite from HR. 4:00 p.m. The attendees were Richard Caldwell, the firm's founding partner and its moral compass, Marcus, Isabella, and the head of human resources. The subject line was chillingly simple: Project Helios, Conduct Review. They had given me 2 hours. 2 hours for Marcus to marshal his forces and frame his narrative of my betrayal. But I wasn't the same woman who had been dismissed that morning. The terrified junior architect had died in that glass box. I spent those 2 hours not in fear, but in preparation. I meticulously compiled every digital file, every timestamped design iteration, every email updating Isabella on my progress, every chat log where I discussed a technical solution. I printed every document, creating a thick file that represented the undeniable truth of my authorship. I was building a fortress of facts. At 3:58 p.m., I walked into Richard Caldwell's office. It was the firm's hallowed ground, lined with leather-bound books and architectural awards from a bygone era. Caldwell, a man in his late 70s with a reputation for integrity that Marcus had long since eroded, sat at the head of the table. His face was an unreadable, stony mask. "Miranda, have a seat," he said, his voice gravelly. "We need to discuss today's events." Marcus, unable to contain himself, jumped in before I was even fully seated. "Richard, this is an open and shut case of insubordination. She deliberately sabotaged a $900 million presentation. She withheld information with the express purpose of embarrassing senior leadership." "Is that true, Miranda?" Caldwell asked, his piercing blue eyes fixed on me. I placed my thick folder on the table with a soft, definitive thud. "What's true, Mr. Caldwell, is that I am the sole author of the Helios Tower design concept and all its innovative systems. What's true is that this morning, I was told I was too junior to present my own work. And what's true is that the actuator mechanism is a proprietary innovation of such complexity that it requires direct explanation from its creator, not a simplified summary from a sales team." Marcus began, but Caldwell raised a hand, a gesture that still commanded absolute authority in this firm. "Let her finish." I opened the folder. "In here you will find a complete chronological record of the project. It will show my work, my contributions, my solutions. It will also show, by its very absence, any substantive design contribution from Mr. Thorne or Ms. Rossi. They were presenting a project they could not explain because they did not understand it. They did not understand it because they did not create it." Marcus's face purpled. "Are you threatening us with this folder?" "I am establishing facts," I said calmly. "The fact is, I solved the problem, I designed the tower, and today, when it mattered most, I secured the client. My insubordination, as you call it, saved Crestwood's biggest opportunity in its history." Caldwell leaned back, steepling his fingers and studying me as if for the first time. "Tell me honestly, Miranda, why did you really leave the actuator design out?" The room fell silent. This was the moment of truth. "Because I knew," I said, my voice dropping but losing none of its intensity, "that if the complete design was in that portfolio, you would never have any reason to know who I was or what I had done. After a year of seeing my ideas absorbed and rebranded by others, I needed leverage. I needed one part of my creation that could not be stolen. Was it a calculated risk? Yes. But it was a risk taken in the service of the project, and in the defense of my own professional existence." Marcus saw his chance. "She admits it. She manipulated the situation for personal gain. This is a fireable offense, Richard. It's a breach of trust." Caldwell ignored him, turning instead to the head of HR. "Have we had any official communication from Kaylin Sterling's office post-meeting?" The HR director shifted uncomfortably. "Yes. An email arrived about 30 minutes ago. It came directly from Mr. Sterling. He confirms their intention to award the Helios Tower contract to Crestwood, pending some contractual adjustments." She paused, glancing nervously at me. "He specifically names Miranda Vance as the required lead project architect for the duration of the project." The air went out of Marcus's sails. His mouth hung open. Caldwell turned back to me, a new light in his old eyes. "So Sterling wants you, specifically?" "Yes." "And you are confident you can deliver on this impossibly complex project?" "I am the only one who can," I said, without arrogance, only fact. Caldwell nodded slowly. Then he turned to Marcus and Isabella. "Leave us. I need to speak with Ms. Vance alone." The look of pure, shocked betrayal on Marcus's face was almost worth the entire ordeal. Almost. He and Isabella rose and departed, leaving their ghosts of ambition and failure in the room. When we were alone, Caldwell looked at me for a long time. "That was a very dangerous game of poker you played today, young lady." "It wasn't a game to me, sir," I replied. "It was my career." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Fair enough, but this changes things. Intentionally withholding information creates a vulnerability for the firm. Taking credit for the work of others and sidelining your most innovative talent creates a much greater vulnerability, I countered, emboldened. He actually chuckled, a dry, rusty sound. You don't back down, do you? I can't afford to. He leaned forward, all business. Here is what is going to happen. You will be the lead architect on the Helios Tower. You will have your own team. You will report directly to me. If you deliver this project, if you make the Helios Tower a reality, we will fundamentally restructure your position within this firm. Your name will be on the door. And if I don't deliver, I asked. Then we will both have been wrong about you, he said, the implication clear. Now, that actuator design, is it documented yet? It will be on your desk in a secured file by 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, I said. Good, he said, I admire. You're fire, Miranda, but don't ever put this firm in that position again. Build bridges, not walls. I will, Mr. Caldwell, I said, now that I'm allowed to own the building materials. The next few months were a blur of intense work and tectonic shifts within the firm. Marcus Thorne was quietly reassigned to exploring international markets, a well-known corporate exile. Isabella tried to mend the fence, offering stilted apologies and attempts at mentorship that felt transparently self-serving. I kept our interactions polite, professional, and distant. Some structures, once compromised, can never be fully trusted again. I built my team from the ground up, hiring other brilliant young architects who had been overlooked. We became the Helios Lab, an innovation hub within the firm, reporting directly to Caldwell. We worked with a feverish passion, driven by the project of a lifetime. A week before we were due to break ground, Kaylin Sterling requested a private video call with me and Mr. Caldwell. Miranda, Richard, he began, we're ready to sign the final papers, but I have one more condition. My heart seized, Caldwell leaned forward. I'm impressed with Miranda, and I'm impressed with how Crestwood has rallied behind her talent, Sterling said. But talent needs to be protected. The final contract will include a key person clause. Should Ms. Vance leave Crestwood for any reason during the project's lifetime, Sterling Dynamics retains the right of first refusal to hire her and her entire lab to see the project to completion, either as direct employees or as an independent consultancy. Caldwell and I exchanged a look. It was more than a safety net, it was a golden parachute. It was Sterling telling the entire industry that the value wasn't in the Crestwood name, but in my mind. Caldwell smiled broadly. Mr. Sterling, it is our full intention to make sure Ms. Vance is so happy here, she never even thinks of leaving. We accept your terms. After the call, Caldwell turned to me. He's not just buying a building, he said with a sense of awe. He's investing in you. He paused, then pushed a document across the desk. It was an offer letter, not just for a promotion, but for a junior partnership. My name, Miranda Vance, printed in bold type. When the news was officially announced, my first act as a partner was to institute a firm-wide policy. All major presentations would now require the presence of the primary design contributors, regardless of their seniority. And every project would have attribution clearly documented from inception. I wasn't just building a tower. I was redesigning the foundations of the firm that had almost erased me. 6 months later, I stood on the construction site, a hard hat on my head, the wind whipping around the rising steel skeleton of the Helios Tower. I was watching something impossible take shape, a testament to what can happen when truth is given a voice. My phone buzzed. It was a picture message from a friend, a young female architect I was mentoring. The message showed a screenshot of an industry blog. The headline read, "The coup at Crestwood, how a junior architect redefined a legacy firm." Just so you're clear, Marcus, ID said, catching him by the elevators. The Helios Lab will be auditing all ongoing projects for accurate attribution. I imagine Mr. Caldwell will be very interested in the aha moments you've been having for the last 5 years. He paled, the threat landing with pinpoint accuracy. The fear in his eyes was the silent acknowledgement of his entire fraudulent career. That was the real correction, not his demotion, but his knowing that I knew. Standing there on the site, I thought about that moment in the glass box. One decision, one act of defiance born of desperation, had triggered an avalanche. Sometimes, the only way to prove your worth in a system designed to overlook you isn't to ask for a seat at the table. It's to build a new one, right in the center of the room, and demand they all pull up a chair. If you're out there, fighting to be seen, your work being claimed by another's voice, remember this. The most valuable thing you possess is the one thing they can never truly steal, the mind that created it all. You just have to be brave enough to prove it's yours. What's your story? I know I'm not the only one who has had to fight this battle. Let me know in the comments below.